Ever find yourself thinking about the afterlife? Like really thinking about it? It's one of those questions that's always kind of bugged me, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It's a universal head scratcher.
But here's the thing I find kind of wild. A recent survey said that 75% of Americans think we all end up in heaven. Like everyone, no matter what.
Wow, that's a lot of folks banking on a free pass.
Right. But the blog post we're diving into today, this one's from Chucky's Corner. Well, let's just say it paints a slightly different picture.
Different how? Like different brushstrokes or a whole different subject matter?
Think less everyone gets a trophy and more exclusive VIP section. We're about to get into this whole narrow path to the afterlife thing, specifically through the lens of modern Christianity, you know.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So we're talking about the nitty-gritty of what it actually takes to get to heaven, according to this blog.
Exactly. And heads up, Chucky, the author, doesn't pull any punches.
Oh, lay it on me. I like a good theological debate.
Well, he basically says finding this narrow gate to eternal life. Yeah, not so easy. In fact, he suggests very few people actually manage to find it.
That's a pretty bold statement. Makes you wonder why it's so tough, especially now, right? You'd think with all the advancements we've made, finding this so-called path would be a bit more straightforward than, say, back when the Romans used Christians as lion snacks.
Right, you'd think so. But get this, Chucky actually says there are fewer truly dedicated followers of Christ now than ever before.
Fewer, huh? That's interesting because on the one hand, you've got more people straight up saying, religion, nah, not for me.
Right, the whole secularism thing.
Exactly. But then there's the whole spiritual but not religious crowd. They might believe in a higher power, maybe even call themselves Christian, but they're not exactly lining up for church every Sunday.
So it's not just about how many people identify as Christian, but how many are really, truly all in on following those teachings, walking the walk, so to speak.
Hit the nail on the head. And that's where things get really interesting, I think. What makes this path so darn difficult, especially in the 21st century?
Well, Chucky's got a few ideas about that. One of the first things he digs into is this idea of radical commitment, like really radical.
Okay, how radical are we talking?
Well, he drops this line from the Gospel of Luke where Jesus says, and I quote, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple."
Whoa. Okay, that's intense.
Yeah, kind of makes you rethink your priorities, right?
It definitely gives family comes first a whole new meaning. But seriously, hate your family. That can't be what's meant, right?
Well, you got to remember, it's all about the context.
Yeah.
It's more about prioritizing your relationship with God over everything else, even your closest family.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense. But prioritizing one thing usually means something else gets put on the back burner.
Exactly. And that's where things can get complicated, especially in our modern lives.
Right, like how do you square that with, say, your career ambitions or even just wanting to fit in?
And that's the thing. Chucky doesn't just throw out this idea of radical commitment. He drops this statistic that only 20% of Christians actually prioritize God above all else.
Wow. 20%. So even among those who consider themselves followers, it's still a pretty small percentage who are truly deeply committed.
Seems like it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the challenges of this whole narrow path idea. So we've got this radical commitment thing, which, let's be real, is a pretty tall order on its own. But Chucky doesn't stop there. He throws out another doozy.
Yeah.
This idea of living in the world but not being of it.
Ah, yes, that old chestnut. It's one of those phrases that sounds deep, but pinning down what it actually means, that's a whole other sermon.
Right. So how do we make sense of it, especially today?
Well, it helps to think back to those early Christians. They were smack dab in the middle of Roman society, right? Surrounded by stuff that directly contradicted their beliefs. Pagan rituals, the whole gladiatorial games thing, you name it.
Talk about a culture clash.
Totally. But even then, they were called to engage with their society, not build walls and hide from it.
So it's like finding that balance. Being in the world, but not letting it consume you.
Exactly. And that's a tightrope walk we're still trying to navigate today, even without the threat of, being thrown to a lion.
Okay, but the world's a lot louder now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, between social media and everything else, it's like a constant barrage of information and opinions.
100%. It's easy to get swept up in all that noise, especially when it comes to what you're supposed to believe or how you're supposed to live. It's about figuring out how to participate, how to enjoy what the world has to offer, but without letting those external things define who you are at your core.
It's like figuring out which voices are worth listening to and which ones you need to tune out.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that takes discernment, something Chucky actually talks about quite a bit. It's tied to this whole idea of faith and doubt, which, let's be honest, can feel kind of contradictory.
Because you'd think having faith means you've got it all figured out, right? No room for doubt.
It's a natural human thing to crave certainty. But the funny thing about faith, at least in my experience, is that it often grows strongest in those moments when things feel shaky.
It's like that saying, the darkest nights produce the brightest stars.
Exactly. It's about trusting that even when we can't see the whole path, there's still a plan, a purpose.
And Chucky takes this even further, this idea of not just dealing with doubt, but actually bearing our crosses. And I'm not going to lie, that imagery always kind of makes me squirm a little.
It's heavy stuff, no doubt. And back in Roman times, carrying your own cross, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. It meant humiliation, it meant suffering, it meant death was coming. It was a heavy, heavy symbol.
So when Jesus used this image, he was preparing his followers for the very real possibility of persecution.
Absolutely. But it goes even deeper than that. It's about recognizing that this whole narrow path thing, it's not about avoiding the tough stuff, the challenges, the hardships. It's about embracing them, using them to become stronger, to become more aligned with what we believe.
So we're not off the hook just because we're not literally carrying wooden crosses through the streets.
I wouldn't say that. It's more about recognizing that we all carry crosses in our own way, those internal battles, the fears, the doubts, the things that keep us up at night.
It's like those internal struggles, those personal demons, those are the crosses we're carrying around.
Exactly. And just like those early Christians, we're called to face those struggles head on. Not let them crush us, but let them refine us.
So it's about turning those struggles into something positive, using them to grow.
You got it. Think of it like, I don't know, working out, right? It's tough, it hurts sometimes, but you come out stronger on the other side.
That's kind of how I see this whole narrow path thing. It's about pushing through those challenges, those growing pains, to become more resilient, more in tune with who we really are.
This has been pretty intense, not gonna lie. There's so much to unpack with this whole narrow path idea.
Tell me about it. It's a lifetime's worth of exploration, really.
For sure. But if someone's listening to this thinking, okay, this all sounds good, but where do I even start? What would you tell them?
That's a question Chucky grapples with too. And one thing he keeps coming back to is the importance of community, like really finding your people.
Which can be tough. He even mentions that 60% of people feel out of place or misunderstood in their own religious groups. That's wild.
It's a real struggle.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? We all crave that sense of belonging, a feeling of being seen and accepted for who we are.
Totally. It's like we need those people who get it, who are on a similar journey, even if it looks different for everyone. 100%. We need those folks who will walk alongside us, challenge us, support us, all that good stuff.
But even when you find your people, there's still that pressure to measure up, right? Like, am I doing this faith thing right? Am I as good as so-and-so?
Oh, that comparison game is a killer.
Yeah.
And in this day and age with social media and everything, it's easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing, what they have, who they are.
And it's usually a recipe for feeling totally inadequate. Like you're not good enough, not doing enough, not being enough.
And that's where it's so important to, I don't know, maybe hit the pause button for a sec. Tune out all that external noise and really tune into what matters to you. What are your values? What makes you feel aligned, centered, at peace?
So less about keeping up with the Joneses and more about marching to the beat of your own drum.
Exactly. We all have our own paths to walk, our own crosses to bear. And the more we can focus on our own journey, the less we need to compare ourselves to others.
It's been awesome diving deep into this whole narrow path thing with you today. It's a lot to think about, that's for sure.
You said it. But it's good stuff to wrestle with. Important stuff, even.
For sure. And for anyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some things to ponder, maybe even sparked some new insights or questions. Because at the end of the day, this journey of faith, this search for truth, it's a deeply personal one.
And remember, it's not about having all the answers, but about being brave enough to ask the questions, to keep seeking, keep growing, and keep walking your own path, whatever that looks like for you.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep living authentically.